Before the break, when you were talking about consciousness and the evolution of consciousness, it seemed to me that you were raising this very important question about whether or not consciousness precedes matter or whether consciousness is derived from matter. Okay, so really important question. And it seems to me it's almost has been an unresolvable kind of issue. But I'm wondering if you delved into, because you're obviously so serious-minded and you really treat these things with a lot of depth, if you looked into artificial intelligence at all, because there seems to me that we're nearing an inflection point where the sophistication and power of machine intelligence will replicate the mathematical properties of the human brain. And then we'll get an objective test as to whether or not consciousness will emerge from that organism, or whether or not it won't, in which case we have more support for a more metaphysical notion.
I think it's an interesting point. The point at which artificial intelligence would become conscious awareness. What do you add to make it?
Well, the idea was, for many years, they had computed the number of synaptic connections in the brain, which is 10 to the 16th power. Don't even try it on your calculator. It's some gargantuan...
Right, well that's the Hawking, those are the
that's an incomprehensible number. And within those connections, there's a speed factor that they have this formula called computations per second, which is also a gargantuan number. But as the speed and power of the technologies are increasing at an exponential level, we are actually getting to the point where those numbers are being reached. At least they anticipate within the next 10 years. So a lot of people, like Hawking and other people, are talking about whether or not we will get a test case.
Get iRobot. And in the embryology book, which I wrote way back in the 90s originally, I talked about exactly that issue of how many connections you'd need and so forth, and I took the kind of somewhat arrogant position that I think I called them filaments, that no amount of filaments would create consciousness, that for all intent and purposes you might as well use ping pong balls. My own belief, but what's a belief? A dime a dozen in that sense. My own belief is that that there are like the aura, that there are multiple planes to our self-awareness, and that it's coming not just from the physical plane, it's coming from other planes of being, so that you can't actually replicate it without those other planes of being. But that's up for grabs.
What would be the test of consciousness? So that you don't know it's just a Turing machine.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's a very complicated question, but the essence of consciousness is self-awareness. So
but how do you communicate?
Well, one way that you have to come up with some kind of variable that you can look at, and one that's been suggested. I'm not saying this is the end-all, and then this is a satisfying answer. I'm just telling you what people say, is self-correction. So we're conscious in what we can see errors that we've made, problems in our life, and we can strive to improve those. That's one element. Self-improvement is one element of consciousness.
There's computer algorithms today that do that.
On a simple level, yeah, but computers that could correct and modify and in a way improve themselves is one element of consciousness. But I think Richard's raised that consciousness may be a multi-plane concept, and this is too reductionistic.
If you define consciousness as the experience of being self-aware, then you can only measure it phenomenologically by looking in.
Yeah.
You can't, but
there's no intersubjective test.
Yeah, Turing test kind of can infer it, like circumstantially, by asking questions and trying to test, but you can't actually measure it.
Yeah, there have been some pretty tricky dialogues that have been convincing. And you'd say, no, a machine didn't do that. And
Of course, there are a lot of human beings we can question
Yeah,
their
right.
consciousness too.
If you look at the advancement from ape to human and where that dividing line occurred, we could almost hyper out that theory and look at the shift from the human to the cyborg. And where's that dividing line? You know, that's going to be fascinating, because I do feel that we are going to be seeing conscious machines or hybrids, that they're hybrid with human. I think that that's going to, maybe even in our lifetime, we might have that experience.
But we got it right now, this is part of my brain, it's a prosthetic.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a little far out.
As an artist and person who values consciousness for my non-rational thinking, I don't actually look to machines to be able to map consciousness or, you know, define consciousness. I think that there are so many clues, and like the psychic work of Madame Blavatsky, the 7 levels of consciousness that this guy John Friedlander reminds us of. It's certainly not his idea. It's been around forever, and it's Vedic, I'm pretty sure, in origin. So it seems to me part of our intoxication with technology to get excited about. I mean, even Donna Haraway, who I admired a great deal for her work with cyborg kind of consciousness. It's just all so right there if you're a creative artist. And it seems a funny, almost reductionist to me, although I can see that challenges are what science is all about.
I think you made a really good point that these definitions, you know, these definitions of what consciousness are can be overly simplified, and it may be a lot more complicated than that. At the same time, we may be guilty of a kind of human, organic narcissism that we think that we're so special in the universe.
Do you think there's a relationship between love and gravity? Could they possibly be the same thing? Quantum mechanics, the scientists that are studying that keep finding that consciousness is unavoidable in the study of atoms and particles in quantum mechanics, that they keep running into consciousness, influencing the science of it. So maybe this is pointing to the fact that consciousness is primary. And at the same time, astrophysicists are having a really hard time explaining gravity. There's something called dark matter out there that seems to, that they've theorized must exist because of the way that the orbits and the way planets behave. They behave as if there's a lot more matter there than there really seems to be. And so in order to make the equation work, they've come up with this thing called dark matter. It has to exist because the behaviors of the objects in the universe sort of suggest that it exists. And what is gravity but a form of attraction? And that actually everything in the entire universe is attracted to everything else in some manner. And
Gravity is probably easier to define than love.
yeah.
But there are many interesting options for what gravity is. But Newton himself, who was the first one to put his finger on
To
it,
identify the name.
believed that he had discovered God. He, said very clearly it is the way in which God puts his finger on every molecule in the universe simultaneously. Some have said that gravity is the 4th dimension, or the 5th dimension. If time is the 4th dimension, gravity is the 5th dimension, because it's pressing down on everything. And then to a degree that I don't fully understand but find tremendously interesting, is Einstein, taken out of Einstein's equations, the notion that there's only curvature, and that gravity is the illusion caused by curvature. I'm not very, I wrote this much more articulately in The Night Sky. But if you figure that, that if you try and think of love in its most primary sense, maybe even Freud's use of the word libidinal, or eros. And then you think of gravity in its most fundamental sense. And you know what's the flower of life stuff? You know that workshop?
Sacred geometry?
Yeah, they try and use, they try and create, essentially extra bodily devices to travel with and fueled by the force of love. And then, so what that would mean to me is, love then would be a vibration that you would attain, and at that point you're getting close to gravity as a vibration. So.